this new colleague came in and my salary was $72 a week. He came in and his salary was $112 a week. My manager said, well, first he's a guy.
Christiane Germain. From Dragon's Den, Quebec, she inspires young entrepreneurs, having founded Germain Hotels, and is the current president with over 16 chains across Canada. She also sits on the board of directors of Montreal's Fine Arts Museum.
I was not bad at school, but I didn't like school. So
if I was sitting at a board meeting when COVID hit, what would I have seen?
I was in a state of denial.
Christiane, the thing I love to do on this podcast is really dig deep into someone's early beginnings. And having someone of your stature, I want to ask you a bit of a fun question at the start. If your story was a book, what would be the title of it?
I think it would have something to do, because when we opened our first hotel in 1988, I had never worked in a hotel before. So it's like, going out of my comfort zone is something that I enjoy doing, and it has taught me a lot, and it took me to places that I would have never gone to, So I don't know what the exact title would be, but it would have I think it would have something to do with out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I was reading The Comfort Crisis recently by Michael Esther, and the whole book talks about how we reverted to being so safe, even the way we protect our children. And something echoed in Walter Isaacson's biography recently of Elon Musk is that Elon let his kids run around and experiment. And kind of digging into your story, I wonder if comfort and getting out of your comfort zone was something that was fostered in by your parents.
Maybe. Well, I would have to think about this. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. Both my parents were really entrepreneurs. So I guess when you are that, you always go out of your comfort zone. You always do things for the first time. When you open a new business, very often it's, my father, was the first restaurateur to open a steakhouse in Quebec City in 1962. So, and I don't think he had ever cooked a steak before. So, it's going out of your comfort zone probably was, it wasn't something that my parents were telling me, but I could see by their lifestyle that that's what they were doing all the time, So I guess, I was brought up like that.
What's the cost of that? Because I listen to a lot of entrepreneurs, and specifically those that had entrepreneurial parents. And something you often hear is that the parents weren't as present, and that's what allowed the kids to venture out and explore the world because their parents weren't as present. Your parents being entrepreneurial, what was the household like? If I was a fly on the wall, what would I have seen?
Well, you would have seen, my mother was, they started the business together, but when we turned 6 or 7 or 8, I'm not sure I know exactly when, but my mother stopped working. So she would be more at home with us. My dad was a hard worker. So he would, they had restaurants then, and, but he was busy doing all kinds of things. Like he was part of, he actually started a lacrosse team, professional lacrosse in Quebec City. So he was very much involved into doing new stuff. So I would say my mother was more at home, but at the same time, she would prepare the dinner for us, and then she would later go on with my dad and join him for supper later on at the restaurant. And so they were present, but not with us all the time, which I think is good, because we often say that it takes a village to raise children. So I think when children are exposed to other people than their parents, it's great. I think it's very good because it gives them the chance to get to know other people and to understand how other people would live. And so I think it's very good to be exposed to other people than your parents. Yeah. And we really were, as my daughter was, because I raised a daughter, and I at the same time I was starting my own company, so I was at home all the time. I had babysitters, and I had a lot of people around me that actually helped me raise my daughter. And I think it's a good way to do it. You can't do everything all by yourself.
Following up on your point about exposure and surrounding yourself with a lot of like interesting people, I know you've like traveled quite a bit. You left school, worked at a bank, you were in the States. And can you walk us through that journey? Because I'm sure that like we're in those years in our like 20s where we're trying to explore and trying to get somewhere. What was your...
Well, I wasn't. First of all, I don't regret it, but I know I would probably do things differently today because I wasn't very. I was not bad at school, but I didn't like school, so I kind of slowed down rapidly on going to school. Like I stopped going to school. I was at yes, yeah, after my because I did grade 12. And then I went to, here in Quebec, we have the cégep, So I went to the cégep and I really didn't like it. And that was the first few weeks of the year. So, and my parents were gone on a holiday. So I decided to stop going to school. When they came back, they realized that I was at home quite a lot. And then they asked me, well, you're not going to school? And I said, well, yeah, but I find, after a couple of days, I had to tell them that I had quit, so my dad said, it's fine if you don't want to go to school, but you need to work. So I applied for a job, and I got a job at a bank, which was La Banque Nationale. No, at the time it was called La Banque Provinciale. So it was a Quebec bank. So I got a job there, and I worked there for about a year, and until this guy came in, this new colleague came in, and my salary was $72 a week, and he came in, and his salary was $112 a week. So I went to see my manager, and I said, "Why is this guy making 112, and I've been here for a year, and I'm making $72 a week?" So my manager said, well, first, he's a guy. And second, he finished his cégep, So I then realized, obviously, I wasn't planning on becoming a man. So maybe I could go back to school. So that's when I decided to go back to school. And I went to Toronto. There was a course there on hotel and restaurant administration because, as I told you, my parents were in that business. So, and I liked it. It was fun. I liked the restaurant business, not the hotel because I didn't know it, but I liked the restaurant business. So I went to Humber College in Toronto, and I was there for 2 years. And then, after my Humber College, I applied for a job I was in Montreal one day, and I saw an ad in the paper, and there was a job for a company called Victoria Station that were opening restaurants in Canada, and they were based out of San Francisco, and I decided to apply for the job. And I did. I was, I guess, 20 years old at the time, and I got the job. So I was very, very excited. So I did my training in San Francisco for 6 months, and it was got to be a great, great experience, and I've always wanted to travel and see the world. And so for me to be in San Francisco at that time, it was a great experience. So I got the training, and I went to Vancouver because the restaurant that I was hired for was the one in Montreal, and it wasn't ready for the opening. So they sent me to Vancouver to sort of work there a little bit, and I was there for a few months. And once the restaurant in Montreal got ready to to be open, I moved back to Montreal and worked there for a year. And then my dad said, why don't you come back to Quebec City? I mean, you've gained a great experience. And he had bought a new restaurant. And he said, because I negotiated my thing with my family. I said, to go back, I want to be able to do that type of restaurant and da-da-da. So he said, yes. And we did that in Quebec City. And it turned out to be a real busy place, very successful. And so that was in the end of the 70s, 79. And I did that for a few years, got my baby, Marie-Pierre, in 82. And then I felt like doing something else. I was a little tired of the restaurant business. The restaurant business is great, but it's very, very demanding. So I was tired a little bit, and I wanted to do something, but didn't know what. So started thinking, started saying, what about this, what about that? And I knew I wanted to be in the hospitality business. I didn't know exactly what it would be, but I knew it was going to be the hospitality. So I went to New York because at the time, back in the 80s, internet wasn't there. When you wanted to get new ideas, you had to sort of travel and see new things because it wasn't about a click and, So, yeah, different. So we went to New York and someone had told us to go and stay at the Morgan. So we did. And it was one of the first boutique hotels in America. We went there. My brother and I, we kind of fell in love with it. And that was it. That was 86, came back. My dad owned a building, office building at the time. And we made him, we asked, because it was, it's interesting because the building was full of tenants. And we finally sold him the idea of turning this building into a hotel. It took us some time, but we really did it. So we opened the hotel in 1988. Yeah, first hotel. And, the hotel was quite successful right from the beginning, which was great. We were very happy. And we actually opened the second one in 96 and then Montreal. The second one was also in Quebec City. And and we opened the third one in Montreal. After opening Montreal in 1999, we started thinking about opening all across the country. So, yeah. So that's, yeah.
And it's this, let me not put too much thought behind it and go ahead with it. And I know from listening to your other interviews, it's something that you continuously preach, is that don't overthink it, just do it. But why do you think so many people overthink?
Well, it has to do, I guess, how could I do I know? I don't think I know the answer to your question. But I think it's a matter of personality as well. There are people, that this is what they do. They have ideas, they want to measure, they want to really analyze the risk, and they can do that for forever. I'm more like that. I have become more like that because now I have more at stake, But when I started, I was 20, 34, 5. And I had nothing. Well, I had things, but not big, So I had nothing at stake. It was just and I always had this in my mind. If I do something and it doesn't work, well, I'll be able to run a small coffee place and sell coffee and living out of it, I've never done this I never thought about being rich and famous. It was never something that I wanted to be, having lots of money and da-da-da-da. It has never been my goal in life. my goal was to do things that I like. And it was very important to be myself, to be financially independent. But to be financially independent it's just, to be able to make a living on your own, right? So it was never about being rich. It was just, I have to make myself a living. So if my project doesn't work, then I'll run a coffee place and sell coffee. And, it's never been, now I have, when we're doing another hotel in Ottawa, we started the construction. We're going to start the construction very, very shortly. And of course, now when we have projects, I do protect myself more because I have more. So it has changed a little bit. But it's, no, I think, a lot of people are trying to be entrepreneurs. They try and they realize that it's not in their genes. You have to, it's not given to everybody, I think, and you have to know yourself. And because being an entrepreneur is you're your own boss. And I understand for a lot of people, it's very important to think that you're your own boss. But at the same time, there's always someone above you that's not running your life. But, when you're an entrepreneur and you owe money to the bank, the bank is your boss, right? So it's, and it's very demanding. It's a lot of hours, and you have to sacrifice a lot of things sometimes. So it's not given to everybody to do that, So you have to get to know yourself and choose the right thing for you. Because being an entrepreneur is a lifestyle. You have to keep that in mind, So you have to be ready to have that lifestyle.
I believe one of your keys to success is providing great hospitality and great service. Your company has been listed as a top 50 employer in Canada. So not only do you treat your customers well, but you also treat your employees well. And I'm wondering, I understand a lot of people go through hospitality school, and I think from a surface level, it looks not too difficult to have some decent respect, treat people with decency. But why do you think you're able to contribute or grow into such how do you think you became synonymous with hospitality? What?
Well, it's, I guess, first of all, we have, as a company, we have values that are very, very important. And so we do our best. We work very hard at being able to pass those values on to our employees, because when you talk about service and you want to please the guest, you have to be able to please your employee first, because that person is going to do the job of pleasing, your guests, so being unique to your guests. So that's why in our business, in any service business, I think being very respectful of your employees is extremely important, and choosing the right person for the job, because there are people who are not. It's how could I say this? There are people who are not. It's not part of themselves to give pleasure to somebody else. It doesn't make them bad or good. It's just, it's not part of you. There are people who like being in a lab, doing some research, being all by themselves, and that's it. And it's fine. We need those people. In my business, I need people who take pleasure in interacting with other people. So it's important to choose the right people for that kind of job. So that's I think it's rule number one, and it's being respectful with these people. If you respect them, it has a cascade effect, right? They're going to be respectful, and and as much as we do have interaction with our device, our phones, I think people are at certain times still looking for human interaction. They want to be able to talk to someone. They want to be able to, see someone react to what they say. And so I think in our business, it's something we have to put emphasis on. It's not because you do your check-in on your phone that you don't want to see anybody else. And so it's changing a lot, though. I mean, I have to, but it's still very important. And I like to think it's interesting because yesterday we had a meeting with our recruiters, all of the other recruiters, that people that are hiring our people, and I was meeting them just to explain to them, tell them what I was just telling you, because it's important for me that they hear it from me. Because everyone has his way of hiring. So I think it's still very important that I communicate myself. I do the communication myself with people, so.
Important role of a founder is hiring, and it's often so disregarded. I mean, even we're in business school, and HR is often, disregarded and looked upon. But when you pick up a book from Ben Horowitz,
changing. Thank God it's changing, HR, you're right. 5 years ago, HR was, okay, you're HR. But now I think if I can predict one thing, you'll see more and more CEOs that actually started their career in it. And before it was more finance, it was more, and finance would move up. And HR was always HR. But you're going to see more HR moving up to CEOs because it's becoming so important in running a business. The relations you're developing with people is key. And whether it's your employees, guests, whatever, it's very important. So, sometimes it's just a matter of asking a person, how are you doing? And listening to the answer. Because sometimes there are people who are asking, but they don't listen to the answer. But, having this moment with someone and saying, how are you? And listening to the answer can be very, very productive.
Because that's what I noticed amongst the difference between an entering manager and a very senior person. It's really just this obsession with people, and putting the people before anything. But I think that's to do with something else that if I look through your story, I can find. And it's your obsession with marginal gains. It's this notion of innovate or die. And I'm reading Bob Iger's book, who's CEO of Walt Disney. And that's what he learned from one of his managers, was this obsession with you have to innovate or you die. And I think it's that obsession that you have at the hotel with those marginal things, those 1% gains that make it so successful. But I think it's the exact same thing that also makes you so attuned to people, because you realize that just saying hi or good morning to a person, that's a 1% gain in the business.
Yeah. And when we talk about innovation, we always think that it has to be a big thing, a big new thing. But innovation, as you just mentioned, sometimes it's just a tiny little thing, it's nothing, it's not always very big, and it's tiny little thing. And it's, I'm in a business of tiny things, all small things. But I think in the end, you're right. It actually makes a difference.
I was reading an article on you that was written around the time of the pandemic. I believe it was like 2021. And it was actually written by Cara Moore, who came onto this podcast. a few episodes back. So that's pretty cool how you two also connected. And I know that during the pandemic, like the hospitality industry suffered. And I was recently listening to an episode by Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, about how he thought of the pandemic as a blessing in disguise, where he got to understand what are the core components of his business that drive his business. And he was able to understand, really redefine what his North Star and the mission of his company is. Did you ever find a blessing in disguise during the pandemic, or how did you cope with all?
Well, I wouldn't go as far as what he found. I didn't, blessing. I could have lived without it. Yeah, I could have lived without it. We always learn something from this, from something so, it was so powerful in its how it happens. And I almost lost my business overnight, and we, thank God, we survived. So you learn about yourself when you go through something like this. You realize how strong you are, and you realize how, I think I learned a lot about myself. I learned about others as well. And after, now that it's behind us, we all learned something. But was it necessary for the good of my business to go through something like that? The answer is no. Okay. And I guess, Airbnb or whatever. I wasn't at the same stage they were. I had been in business for 35 some years. And, I had put everything in there. Everything that my life was my company, right? So I wasn't ready to lose it. And so I put a lot of effort into surviving. So that's fine. Okay. And we did some interesting things, when it did happen, we kept most of our hotels open. And I said to the people that we had kept with us, I said, listen, the hotels are empty. You always talk about doing this, doing that. So this is the time to try new things. Okay. There's nobody in our hotels, so we can try. If you have a good idea, it doesn't cost much. This is the time to do it. And so we came up with a couple of interesting ideas, and actually helped us going through. And it was good because we had to keep our teams busy. So it turned out okay, but still, I didn't have to go through this.
Yeah, it's interesting because Ben Horowitz mentioned this notion of peacetime and wartime CEO. Is there a difference in Christiane Germain's leadership during peacetime and wartime?
Probably. Probably, yes. Yes, the urgency and there probably is a difference, I'm sure. Yes. How would I define the differences?
Or maybe, Christiane, I can ask you the question. If I was sitting at a board meeting when COVID hit, what would I have seen?
First of all, you would have seen someone that then was in what's the word in English? I was in a state of denial. Okay. When it started happening, because actually we opened our hotel in Toronto in 2000. Well, the year of the SARS in Toronto. Okay. So we opened our hotel in Toronto that year, and you probably don't remember that, but the World Health Organization had put Toronto on the list of the cities not to go to because of SARS. And we were opening a hotel, so it was not a good time to do this. Okay, but it lasted for a few months, and it wasn't as bad as the pandemic, of course, but it was challenging. But it stopped after a few months. So when people started talking about COVID, I said, don't worry. I mean, I went through this and nothing to worry about, So it took me, I guess, and my brother the same, because as you know, I'm co-president of this company, brother. So we were, oh, don't worry, guys. I mean, everything's gonna be fine. I mean, people are getting nervous, excited, and the immediate thing. Oh, so I, well, I didn't stay like this for a long time, but so the first few days, it was just I was trying to calm people. Okay, I'm pretty calm when there's a storm. I don't panic. Okay, I'm pretty calm. So I was just relaxed. And then I realized that there was something there. The phone was ringing, cancellations were happening all over the place. I mean, it was just terrible. So I guess I was pretty calm from the outside. I'm not the panic style, but yeah, I definitely was the duck on the water. My feet were going like this, really, really calm. Yeah, and then rapidly, my brother and I made a few calls. Very, in about 24 hours, we had to let go most of our people. We talked to our investors. I mean, all these things, that you have to do. But I think you would have seen a person in control in the boardroom. If you would have seen me at home, it probably would have been different, because I was not that I was just I could not believe what was happening, because I really was afraid that I was going to lose everything. So I was I have to say that the first 3 weeks I had to take a couple of pills to put me to sleep, because it was just. And I remember waking up in the morning, just thinking, was I dreaming? Was this a dream? But it wasn't. So, but we made it. We survived, and yeah, we made it. We're still paying our debt. We still have money to pay our debt. That's good.
I understand, like, you're a co-president and your brother is another huge part of the company. Normally, as like siblings growing up, maybe you don't get along so well together. And I have a younger brother of my own. But I guess as we grew up, we settled aside our differences and we're starting to learn to, like, I guess, grow into adults. How's your relationship with your brother? Like, do you two play distinctive roles, or you guys?
We're very definite about the things we do, and I think that's one of the reasons. First of all, we don't live in the same city. My brother lives in Quebec City. I live in Montreal. Then our jobs. I mean, what we do, it has always been. My brother is more finance and all the financial stuff is more his game. I'm more operations, and I was more marketing. So we would consult each other, but we had our own backyard, and so it was never. I'm sure, of course, sometimes you would, we had not arguments, but we had discussions over stuff. But we were pretty much all the time in agreement. We never did things that, important things that we didn't really agree on. It was always something, when about opening new places, selecting sites. My brother has always been very, very good at selecting sites, hotel sites in different cities, but he would never sign anything without consulting me, and we would talk about it. And every time we would go to a new place, a new city, he would say, well, I've been there, I've seen this and that, so why don't you go and take a look and tell me what you think? And then we would agree. So back to respect, we were very respectful of one another. And I mean, yeah, sometimes I don't agree with him the way he does things, but that's important. It has nothing to do with running the company and one thing that's very important as well, I have complete trust in him, and I think it's the same for him. So yeah, no, we're very lucky this way. Very, very lucky. Yeah.
I think it's fantastic how you and your brother are able to be siblings and also become like business partners.
Yeah, I don't think I could do that with my sister.
No, it's not, and you don't have to. It's not given to everybody, but it actually it can work. I think it does work.
Yeah,
it's not given to everybody, but it can work. Yeah.
And I feel that's what I feel like even when you were talking about the pandemic and in those first 3 weeks were difficult. I think if I were to guess something that was able to get you out of it was your family. And as I was doing a bit of research, I found this photo of you and your daughter with your nephew. And I just found that, this is sometimes the side of the entrepreneurs you don't see, like the importance of family. And I don't think entrepreneurs talk about that enough as that being your rock, that place you go to.
Yeah, but I talk, I talk about it because in my case, it's so important. I mean, my family, my brothers and my family, but my daughter and her children. And no, this is really what's very important in life. It's it's very, very important. And my daughter has a good way of explaining what happened during the pandemic. When she says, because she works with me and my nephew, and we're still a big family working all together. And she said that during the pandemic, it's like what's the word? A bird. When birds are flying together, flying.
Yeah.
And the leader of the changes, but there's always okay. The leader changes depending on whatever when you get started or whatever. And she says, and I think it's a good example because that's what happened. The pandemic, the first months, it was very challenging. So sometimes, I would feel a little down, and my brother or my daughter would, take over and cheer us up. And so, yeah, it's families are really great. When I know sometimes it's difficult and it doesn't work, but it's not our case. So it's our rock, really. Yeah.
And as a tradition on this podcast, for very final question, we'd like to get your thoughts on a quote left by a past guest. And this quote comes from a former CMO of Church's Chicken.
Okay.
And the quote goes, "I'm turned on by making a difference, but I sometimes need to remind myself that it's a choice I've made, not something expected." What are your thoughts?
Yes. No, I understand that. And I mean, the person is interested by making a difference in the life of others. If you want to do this, no, I agree. It's there are choices you have to make sometimes in order to follow what he just said, and sometimes, life can be difficult sometimes because you decided on taking a path, and by taking a path, you sort of have to make choices sometimes, and so those choices are not so easy to make. But you have to be consistent. I think you have to be consistent because if you want people to follow you, to sort of work with you and work, all together, you have to set an example. You have to be consistent. You can't, if you feel something, you have to show the way in line with what your thoughts are. To me, that's very, very important. So sometimes you have to make difficult choices, but that's life.
Thank you so much, Christiane.
For the conversation, you've shared your wisdom and you've shared your story, and I think it'll inspire a lot of people. And so, merci beaucoup, as they say in French.
Merci.